Now our very special honor to have a few words from Angela Davis before the presentation of the Ernie Goodman Award.
Well, I should say, first of all, Margaret looked at me in shock. She had no idea that I had asked to say a few words before she is formally presented with the award. Is this better? Okay, so I'll repeat what I said. When my name was announced just now, Margaret looked at me in shock because she had no idea that I had asked to say a few words before the formal presentation of the Ernie Goodman Award to her. Margaret is literally my oldest friend. She was born 11 months after I was born. And of course, in those days, 11 months seemed to be a long period of time. So she can never remember that we were actually born in the same year. She always thinks of me as much older than she. But I've come to think of her as the eldest, especially since there was a time when I had to entrust my life to Margaret Burnham. And you will hear of all of her remarkable feats, her work as a civil rights lawyer, the fact that she was the first black woman on the bench in Massachusetts, her work as the head of the executive director of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, and her role in helping to establish the truth and reconciliation process in South Africa, and the fact that she is now training law students to use the law to uncover past harms and to discover redress, both through the law and beyond the law for those harms. But I wanted to say a few words because I think it is important that you recognize that that Margaret Burnham did not happen into being. The path she chose was not chosen fortuitously. As I said, she is my oldest friend, and I can tell you that her mother and father were active in radical causes before many of us here this evening were born. They were leaders of what we should know as the other SNCC. That is to say, the Southern Negro Youth Congress. And they were active in the Communist Party. And I know that my family was profoundly transformed by the encounter with the Burnhams. My mother's activism, and in many ways I owe my own political journey to that deep friendship that has continued over generations. And so I would simply like you to know, as you hear about Margaret's amazing, extraordinary accomplishments, that she owes her own path in this world to those who came before her, as we all owe our presence to those who helped to carve out this path of resistance, this path of struggle, this path of radical transformation before us. Thank you, Margaret.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jeannie Meyer. I have the distinct honor and pleasure to introduce Margaret and to hand her the Ernie Goodman Award. I can think of no person more deserving of the Ernie Goodman Award than Margaret Burnham. You know, there are some people in their lives who are very good activists and come by it honestly. And there are some people in their lives who are very good criminal defense attorneys. And there are some people in their lives who are very good judges. And there are some people in their lives who do pioneering civil rights litigation. And there are some people who think about how to fix the past and to address crimes such as apartheid and crimes that were never addressed in the civil rights movement. And there are some people who are good judges. And there are some people who are good professors. Margaret Burnham is all of those and has been all of those, and therefore she is exactly the kind of person who we want to honor with the Ernie Goodman Award. And I have known Margaret, I don't know for how long, but it seems like forever. In fact, my husband's family lived in Brooklyn on the same street as the Burnhams, and so I've always known about the Burnhams through my husband, before I even met Margaret. But I want to tell everybody that Margaret was the director of the NCBL from 1983 to 1986. She's always been a Guild member. She's been on NLG missions to Cuba. And she's also been a very wonderful comrade in the International Association of Democratic Lawyers. And so, Margaret, please come forward and accept this award, accept the Ernie Goodman Award in his memory and based on our friendship.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you to the National Lawyers Guild. Thank you. Thank all of you, especially to Angela, my dear friend and comrade, and to Jeannie, and to the National Lawyers Guild, and to the Massachusetts chapter of the Lawyers Guild, and go Massachusetts! Massachusetts in the house, to my husband and my dear friends, David Kelston and Debbie Kuhn, who are here with us. Thank you all. It's a deep honor to receive this award, and in particular to receive this award amongst the company of Amy and Nighty and Nancy and Jim. an award named for one of the most brilliant, effective lawyer organizers in our country. Ernie Goodman was a man of his time and a man before his time. It was in large part because of his example, of his vision of a different kind of lawyer, not politically neutral advocacy, but militant lawyering. Lawyering for working people, lawyering for peace, lawyering for racial justice, and lawyering to advance the ideals and theories of a socialist world. And importantly for us, Ernie Goodman's commitment to building an organization of lawyers to advance militant lawyering. That's why we're here today. As Damon Keith recalled in the video interview with Bill, the alliances Ernie Goodman formed between black and white lawyers, and here I must call the names of George Crockett and John Conyers and Claudia Markham, really transformed the progressive arena, not only in Detroit, but across the country. It was Ernie Goodman and George Crockett who formed the NLG Committee to Assist Southern Lawyers in the early 1960s, who opened the Jackson, Mississippi office of the Lawyers Constitutional Defense Committee, where it was my great honor to work in the 1960s, and where Claudia and Bill Kunstler and George Crockett and Arthur Kanoy also worked. Many of us were here. Many of us were in the room when Angela spoke on Thursday evening. And her voice, as always, was clarifying, compelling, and challenging, just as it has been for 40 years. There are few others in the world today capable of speaking to so many on so many critical issues and with such depth and breadth and warmth. As an author, as a teacher, as an organizer, her accomplishments and her lifetime commitments, she's a revered person around the world. But for us as lawyers, for us here as legal workers, it's really worth remembering that as uniquely empowering as her voice has been, it could have been silenced. Building a successful defense for Angela was inextricably tied to the history of our National Lawyers Guild, whose 75th birthday we celebrate today. Angela was arrested in 1970, but for 3 decades prior to that, the Guild honed the skills and tools necessary to defend political prisoners. It was Guild lawyers who in the 1940s insisted, against the backdrop of not only the conservative lawyers of the ABA, but as well of the more traditional approach of the NAACP lawyers, that building mass movements was the key to winning political trials. It was Guild lawyers who represented the leaders of the Communist Party in the Smith Act trials in the 1950s. It was Guild lawyers who represented leaders of the Southern movement in the 1960s. It was Guild lawyers who pushed back against the repression that faced the radical movements of the late 60s and on into the 70s. Bill Kunstler, Florence Kennedy, Lenny Weinglass, Charlie Gary, Conrad Lynn. These trial lawyers taught us how to transform a courtroom heavy with fear, repression, guns, and guards into a political space for radical ideas. Those in the Guild who were also leaders of the Communist Party, Mary Kaufman, Doris Bryn Walker, and John Apt. They taught us how to confront vicious anti-communism, both in the courtroom and sometimes within the Guild itself and in its allied movements. the theorists in the Guild, Arthur Conoy, Anne Fagan Ginger, Leonard Boudin. From them, we learned how to transform complex ideas into voir dire questions and closing arguments. We take it for granted now that you can't keep politics out of the courtroom, but in those days, it was completely counterintuitive. Guild lawyers were told that we were placing our clients in jeopardy, that we were self-promoting our own political agendas and dishonoring the profession if we brought radical politics into the courtroom. And it was costly, professionally and otherwise, to take a different path, but Guild lawyers did so. That was the floor upon which we stood when Angela's case came up for trial in 1970. The arguments we needed to win a change of venue, which was critical for our defense, had been developed by Guild lawyers in prior cases. Charlie Gary had written a handbook on how to expose racial bias in voir dire, and the trial team for Angela itself was composed of Guild lawyers, including Darby Walker and Leo Branton and myself. Dozens of lawyers, most of them Guild affiliated, including former President Haywood Burns, Sheldon Otis, Haywood, may he rest in peace, Sheldon Otis from Detroit, Al Brodsky from San Francisco, Frank Wilkerson, Michael Tiger, Dennis Roberts, John Thorne, and Guild students everywhere were involved in the Free Angela movement and in the legal defense. This decades-long work of the Guild is what turned history our way when our jury came back in 1972, and what's made Angela the person, the leader, the champion of all oppressed people across this world, what's kept her in that fight for 40 years. Our victory was the penultimate confirmation that political prosecutions require aggressive, militant political defense in the courtroom and outside of it. Guild lawyers would continue to expand and sharpen these forensic and organizing approaches and apply them successfully in the cases of the Harrisburg 7, the Camden 28, Wounded Knee, and Daniel Ellsberg. Anne Fagan Ginger would capture these practices in her 1975 book, Jury Selection in Criminal Trials, and how lucky we are to have Anne and Ray with us tonight and in this struggle with us for so long. This work continues today. We've heard about the seeds Guild lawyers have planted for 75 years and how strong the young branches and trees those seeds have sprouted have become. We've heard them in the words of tonight's honorees. As younger lawyers take their places beside our Muslim brothers and sisters who are being prosecuted, as we fight attacks on black and brown voting rights today, as we have had to do in the past, and as we marshal allies new and old around immigrant rights. These are the issues. The battleground is the same. Our values are the same. The issues have shifted, but as long as we remain steadfast, we'll get our not guilty verdicts. Thank you very much.